Today we bring you 4 terrifying accounts of real-life encounters with faceless humanoid entities. In the world of the supernatural, some phenomena seem to warrant their own unique category. These beings are neither ghosts, demons, nor cryptids. Here, we enter a realm of the truly bizarre, where entities defy any real ability to categorize. One such type of encounter involves people coming across strange, faceless entities. Join us as we delve into the harrowing experiences of those who have come face to face with these eerie beings. From the desolate backroads of Essex, where an evening drive turns into a nightmarish escape from a faceless pursuer, to the remote woods of British Columbia, where an elderly woman's missing visage leaves a lasting scar on 2 friends. Travel with us to a quiet rural town south of Dallas, where the calm of a starry night is shattered by the appearance of a floating, faceless figure. And finally step into a suburban bedroom, where a teenager's summer night transforms into a scene of pure terror, as a 7-foot-tall, faceless entity looms in the doorway. These are not just stories, but real experiences that blur the line between reality and the unknown. Dim the lights, brace yourself, and prepare to confront the faceless horrors that lurk in the shadows. Moving to Essex was supposed to be a fresh start for Dan and me. The countryside was beautiful, the air was crisp and clean, and our new home nestled among the trees felt like a sanctuary. Little did we know, it would soon become the backdrop for a night of unexplainable terror that still haunts us to this day. It was a typical Friday evening, and we had decided to explore the nearby town. The drive home, however, took an unexpected turn. As dusk gave way to night, the winding country roads grew darker and more foreboding. There were no streetlights to guide us, only the narrow beams of our car's headlights slicing through the pitch-black darkness. I was driving, eager to get home, and perhaps a bit too fast for the bumpy roads. Dan was beside me, scrolling through his phone, the soft glow of the screen the only other light in the car. As we ventured deeper into the countryside, the road narrowed, flanked by dense woods and empty fields. It was the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole, the kind that makes you feel utterly alone. Just as I was about to tell Dan how eerie it felt, there was a sudden loud thud on the roof of the car. My heart leaped into my throat, and I instinctively slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt, and we sat in stunned silence, listening to the quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the engine. "What was that?" Dan whispered, his voice barely audible. Before I could respond, there were 2 more thumps, louder this time, like heavy fists pounding on the roof. Panic surged through me. I looked at Dan, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, I threw the car into gear and floored the gas pedal, desperate to escape whatever was out there. The car lurched forward, speeding down the narrow road. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something chasing us, but there was nothing. The headlights illuminated a small bridge ahead, and I hoped that crossing it would somehow bring us back to safety. As we sped over the bridge, the road curved sharply to the right. I barely managed to navigate the turn, but what we saw next made my blood run cold. The entire road was covered in blood, a gruesome crimson river that seemed to go on forever. There were no animal remains, no sign of what could have caused such carnage, just blood glistening in the headlights. "Oh my God," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What is that?" Dan was staring out his window, his face ashen. "Look," he said, his voice shaking. "Look over there." His face had no features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth, blank expanse where a face should have been. The figure seemed to shimmer at the edges, almost as if it wasn't entirely solid. "Drive faster!" Dan screamed. "You need to get us out of here." I pressed the pedal to the floor, the car roaring down the road. The faceless figure kept pace with us, its eerie form flickering in and out of the shadows. I drove like a maniac, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my ears. Finally, we saw the lights of a main road ahead. Relief washed over me as we sped towards it, leaving the darkness and the faceless figure behind. We didn't stop until we reached my house. I jumped out of the car, ran inside, and locked the door behind us. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. It took Dan nearly 20 minutes to calm me down enough to drive him home. Even then, I refused to take the country roads, opting instead for the well-lit, busy streets. The memory of that night lingered with me for weeks. I couldn't sleep properly, constantly replaying the events in my mind, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. To this day, I avoid driving down those country roads. The image of that faceless figure running beside our car, the inexplicable blood on the road, and the terrifying sounds on the roof of the car remain etched in my memory. Whatever it was we encountered that night, it was something beyond explanation, something that still sends shivers down my spine. The Okanagan Valley in British Columbia is a place of breathtaking beauty. With its rolling hills, dense forests, and sparkling lakes, it's a haven for nature lovers and adventurers alike. My friend Jake and I often spent our weekends exploring its remote corners, enjoying the serenity and the thrill of the unknown. Little did we know that one of our evening drives would turn into a nightmare we'd never forget. It was late autumn, and the air was crisp with a hint of winter's chill. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the landscape. We were driving through a particularly isolated stretch of dirt road, the forest on either side looming like dark sentinels. The only sounds were the crunching of gravel under our tires and the occasional hoot of an owl. Jake and I were chatting about our plans for the winter when we saw her, a lone figure walking along the side of the road. She was an elderly woman, wrapped in a long shawl that billowed around her like a ghostly veil. The sight was unexpected and eerie. It was the kind of place where you wouldn't expect to see anyone, let alone an old woman walking alone at dusk. "Do you think she needs help?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with concern. I nodded, my curiosity piqued. "Let's see if she's okay." We slowed down and pulled up alongside her. The headlights illuminated her figure, casting long shadows that danced on the trees. As we got closer, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something off about her, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Jake rolled down his window. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need a ride?" The woman didn't respond. She just kept walking, her shawl fluttering in the breeze. I leaned over to get a better look, and that's when I saw it. Her face, or rather, the lack of it. Where her eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was nothing but a smooth gray expanse. No features, no expression, just a blank void. "Oh my God," I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. "Jake, drive. Drive now." Jake didn't need to be told twice. He slammed his foot on the gas and we sped away, the car skidding on the gravel. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I kept glancing back, half expecting to see her standing in the middle of the road, but there was nothing, just darkness. We didn't speak for a long time, both of us too shaken to find the words. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling. "But it wasn't human." We drove in silence. The image of the faceless woman burned into our minds. When we finally reached a more populated area, we stopped at a gas station, needing to calm our nerves. The bright lights and the hum of activity were a stark contrast to the eerie quiet of the woods. Over cups of hot coffee, we tried to make sense of what we had seen. We had no rational explanation. Was it a ghost? A hallucination? Some kind of entity we couldn't comprehend? The questions were endless, and the answers elusive. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had encountered something otherworldly, something that defied logic and reason. The memory of her faceless visage haunted my dreams for weeks, and even now I feel a shiver run down my spine whenever I think about it. Jake and I never spoke of that night again. It was an unspoken agreement, a way to cope with the fear and the uncertainty. But every time I drive through the Okanagan Valley, I find myself glancing at the side of the road, half expecting to see her again. In a place as vast and wild as the Okanagan, there are bound to be mysteries we can't explain. Some things are meant to remain unknown, hidden in the shadows of the forest, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to stumble upon them. And for Jake and me, the faceless woman in the woods will forever be a reminder of the things that lurk in the dark, beyond the reach of our understanding. Living in a small rural town south of Dallas, Texas, had its perks. The quiet streets, the close-knit community, and the occasional evening spent under the vast, star-filled sky were things I cherished. But one night, an encounter with the unknown shattered the peace I had always associated with my hometown. It was late, and I had just left my girlfriend's house. We had spent the evening watching movies and talking about our future plans. The streets were dark, with only a few sporadic streetlights offering pools of light in an otherwise shadowy landscape. My car was parked a few houses down, under one of these rare streetlights. The eerie ambiance didn't bother me. I had walked this path countless times before. As I approached my car, I noticed something that made me pause. Crouched about 15 feet away from the driver's side door was a man. He was just within the edge of the light, his features obscured by shadows. My first thought was that he might be homeless or someone looking to break into cars. Growing up in a big city, I had seen my share of such situations, and I wasn't easily spooked. But as I got closer, something about him felt profoundly wrong. He stood up slowly, and the streetlight illuminated him more clearly. His clothes were normal, dark pants and a collared long-sleeve shirt. It wasn't his attire that filled me with dread, but his face, or rather, the lack of it. Where his facial features should have been, there was nothing but a blank, smooth surface. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just an eerie, featureless expanse. It looked almost like an unfinished wax figure. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. Then, as if in a nightmare, the figure began to rise. He wasn't standing on his feet. He was floating, hovering about a foot off the ground. He turned to face me directly, and despite having no eyes, I felt his gaze pierce through me. The fear I felt was unlike anything I had ever experienced, an all-consuming terror that made my legs feel like jelly. Desperately, I fumbled for my car keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I managed to unlock the car and throw myself inside, locking the doors immediately. My breath came in ragged gasps as I started the engine. I reversed the car quickly, turning it so that the headlights were aimed directly at the figure. The sight made my stomach drop. He was now closer, hovering just above the ground, his featureless face turned towards me. The headlights cast a harsh light on him, revealing more of his unsettling form. He seemed taller now, his limbs elongated in a grotesque manner. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the car into drive and sped away, my heart racing faster than the engine. I drove straight to my friend's house, needing to be around someone, anyone, to reassure myself that I was still in the real world. When I finally arrived, I ran inside, my body trembling with fear. It took a while for me to calm down enough to explain what had happened. My friend listened in stunned silence, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you sure you weren't imagining things?" he asked, trying to make sense of my story. "I know what I saw," I replied, my voice still shaky. "It wasn't human. It couldn't have been." For days, I avoided going out after dark, the memory of that faceless figure haunting my every thought. The once familiar and comforting streets of my town now seemed filled with unseen dangers. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting. Eventually, life returned to some semblance of normalcy, but I never forgot that night. Even now, years later, the memory lingers, a chilling reminder of the unknown horrors that can exist in the most unexpected places. Sometimes, late at night, I still find myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see that ominous figure floating just beyond the reach of the light, a faceless specter in the quiet streets of my rural town. The summer of 2011 was unremarkable in many ways. I was a freshman in high school, enjoying the break with the typical teenage mix of boredom and excitement. My family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where the biggest disturbances were barking dogs or the occasional loud party. But one night that summer, something happened that I still can't fully explain, and it changed the way I see the world. It was a hot, muggy night in late July, the kind where the air feels thick and still, and the chirping of crickets seems louder than usual. I had gone to bed around midnight, exhausted from a day spent playing video games and hanging out with friends. Our house was quiet, my parents asleep in their room down the hall, and my younger brother in his room across from mine. Sometime around 1 a.m. I woke up suddenly. At first I wasn't sure what had disturbed my sleep. I lay there in the dark, my mind foggy with sleep, listening to the silence. Then I heard it. Faint footsteps outside my room. They were slow and deliberate, like someone trying to move quietly but not quite succeeding. My heart began to race as I strained to listen, hoping it was just my imagination. The footsteps grew closer and I could hear them more clearly now, soft thuds against the carpeted floor. My room was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. I turned my head slowly towards the doorway, and that's when I saw it. Standing in the doorway was a figure, about 7 feet tall, looming in the shadows. It was bald, with a fair complexion, and wore what looked like old-fashioned clothes, a cream-colored sweater with random paint strokes and splashes of color, and black slacks. But it wasn't the clothes that terrified me, it was the face, or rather, the lack of one. Where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been, there was nothing but smooth, blank skin. No features, no expression, just an eerie void. The figure was perfectly still, its faceless head turned towards me as if it were watching me. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt a wave of indescribable fear wash over me. I blinked, shook my head, and even pinched myself, hoping it was just a nightmare. But the figure remained, its presence more real and menacing with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest and I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice seemed trapped in my throat. Desperation took over, and I pulled the covers over my head, my body trembling with fear. I lay there, my breaths coming in quick, shallow gasps, praying that when I looked again, the figure would be gone. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, the silence in the room almost deafening. Finally, I gathered the courage to peek out from under the covers. I slowly pulled them down and glanced towards the doorway. The figure was gone. The doorway was empty, and the room was once again just a room. But the fear lingered, an oppressive weight on my chest. I lay awake for the rest of the night, my eyes darting to the doorway every few minutes, half expecting the figure to return. When morning finally came, the fear had not completely dissipated. I told my parents about what I had seen, but they dismissed it as a vivid nightmare. My younger brother, however, seemed strangely quiet, as if he knew something but didn't want to say. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself that it had all been a bad dream, a trick of the mind brought on by the summer heat and too many horror movies. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The memory of that faceless figure standing in my doorway haunted me, a constant reminder that there are things in this world beyond our understanding. Even now, years later, I can't explain what I saw that night. I've tried to rationalize it, to find some logical explanation, but nothing fits. The fear I felt was too real, too intense to be a mere figment of my imagination. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the shadows grow long, I still find myself glancing at the doorway, half expecting to see that faceless figure standing there watching me. And in those moments, I remember that summer night in 2011, and the terror that came with it. Are these entities ghosts, aliens, interdimensional intruders, or merely tales spun from the depths of our fears? How can we possibly explain such completely bizarre accounts? Whatever they may represent, stories of these faceless entities continue to surface, leaving us with more questions than answers. These eerie encounters challenge our understanding of reality and remind us that some things remain beyond our comprehension. As we explore the boundaries of the unknown, we may never be able to categorize or fully understand what happens in these encounters. The mystery of the faceless lingers, haunting our thoughts and dreams. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey. Remember, the unknown is always closer than we think, and the next encounter might be just around the corner. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.